First of all, I want to say welcome to everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your crazy schedules. I know that many of you are feeling Zoom fatigue. And so whenever you have an opportunity to choose to get on and do a webinar, I know that it's because you believe you're going to be blessed with some significant content that will help you become a better leader and know what to do in the future as we're trying to figure out how to move forward with COVID-19. I want to just take a minute to introduce our guest today. We have a good friend of Workman Success Systems, a former keynote speaker at our event called Leverage, Mark Sanborn. And Mark came to us because of our love for the way he writes. He's an author. He's an award-winning blogger. He wrote the book called The Fred Factor. If you haven't read that book, you need to go online and order it right now and download it, because it's a great story of how to create exceptional experiences with everybody you run into. And he tells a story of the postman who changed the way he looked at the world. And it was such a fun read. And we use it. We consistently use it in the way we teach and the way we train and the way we teach our leaders to lead. And it's through that service mentality. Mark's an adjunct professor at the University of Memphis and is featured by Crestom, is a DVD-based training series that is literally broadcast in 90 different countries. And that's no small feat. If I get to Canada once in a while, that's my international speaking resume, Mark. So, I know that you've spent your lifetime helping people all over the world, and you've made a tremendous impact. His list of clients, Mark has clients everywhere from Harley Davidson to Costco to Cisco and In-N-Out Burger and so many more. And we're just excited to have him here. And so, Mark, without any further ado, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart and all of the Workman Success family, thank you for being here. And thank you for being willing to share some of your knowledge on helping us think and know what to do and how to really come out of this thing thriving in the future. So, Mark, welcome. And I'm going to just go on mute and I want to listen to you.
Great. Thanks, Fro. Well, as I said, I can't see you all, but it's wonderful to be with you through the magic of technology. Some of you might have heard me at Leverage, and if you haven't, and this is the first time you're hearing me, I look very different live and in person than I do on a little tiny screen. But have any of you woke up in the middle of the night and said, maybe I dreamt this all? Maybe this was the longest dream I've ever had, and then you realized you hadn't dreamt it and you were disappointed? I've quit kind of counting the weeks. I rarely go back and count how long this has been going on, but I will tell you this. This is the longest I have been at home without traveling since I was 20 years old. This has set a new record. I've never spent so much time at home. My wife's never seen me so many days in a row. But what I want to focus on today, about 30, 35 minutes, I'm going to talk, then I'm going to take some questions and try to provide some answers. But I've spent a lot of time thinking about what comes next. And I think there are some things we can be thinking and doing that won't just allow us to survive, because a lot of people are aiming pretty low. They'd just be happy to survive what's going on with COVID-19. But I think we ought to aim higher and we ought to try to thrive. Nassim Taleb talks about the Black Swan. That is an event that is very difficult to predict or to prepare for, but it happens as rarely as a black swan happens in nature. Actually, this pandemic was not a black swan. As pointed out by a writer in the Wall Street Journal, we've known pandemics existed. They've come before and they'll come again. What was the black swan is how we responded to it. Think about this. This is the first pandemic in the history of the world where we quarantined healthy people. And so that was something that I doubt very many people, if any, would have predicted. And if they had predicted it, they would have just gotten lucky and then taken credit later. Right now, I think the two black swans that we deal with in our respective businesses, whether it's real estate or it's a professional speaker, law or education, is twofold. Number one is how our employees respond to this challenge. And number two, just as importantly, but in a way more importantly, how our customers respond. Because how our customers respond will shape how we respond. Now, I want to frame up where we're at today. The first thing is we didn't cause it and we can't control it. And that's frustrating because I'm guessing a lot of you are like me. I'm kind of a control freak. I like to be proactive, take charge, control what I can. I couldn't control this one. The other thing is I can't predict what's going to happen. I'm very leery of anybody who claims they know with precision what's going to happen when we get through this, because I think it's going to be a moving target. I don't think it's going to become a static situation whenever we get to the next phase. What we can do is we can control how we respond. Now, you are an erudite group. You're educated, you listen to speakers, you read books, you go to seminars, and you've heard this before. You can't control what happens, but you can control how you respond to it. It dawned on me that as much as we've heard this, very few people have ever unpacked what exactly that means. I mean, how does that look in real life to respond successfully to a crisis or a challenge like this? And what it is that you need right now. Again, my opinion, I qualify everything as such because I'm not a futurist. I believe predicting the future is easy, but that predicting it correctly is very hard. What you and I want is momentum. We do not want to be flat-footed. We want to have, you know, the old saying, luck favors momentum is true. And there are some people who've resigned themselves to waiting, and they're going to be flat-footed and fall behind whenever things become actionable going forward. Now, I mentioned that I like to be proactive. I wrote a book, and by the way, I think you had an opportunity to download my free ebook, Always Win. That book was originally called Up, Down, or Sideways. And if you haven't downloaded it, just go to marksanborn.com. You'll get an annoying pop-up, but the good news is you'll get a free book out of it. When I wrote Up, Down, or Sideways 10 years ago, we were just coming out of the 2008 recession. Most of our finances had taken a hit. A lot of our businesses had taken a hit. And then to add insult to injury, I'd just been diagnosed with cancer. Now, the good news is I'm cancer-free, so I'm not saying that to make you feel sorry for me. But I learned so much, and I felt so optimistic facing all of those challenges that I wrote this book. And interestingly to me, 10 years later, a lot of the lessons I learned back then are just as applicable today. And here's the big one. You're really not proactive above a personal level. You don't control interest rates. You don't control the Fed. You don't control geopolitics. There are so many things that are forces bigger than you that you don't control that you're really not proactive. And of course, as I just said, being reactive is kind of the kiss of death, right? Because it means you're flat-footed. So if you can't really be proactive and you don't want to be reactive, what should you be? You should be a surfer. See, only Mother Nature can make a wave, a force bigger than the surfer, him or herself. But the surfer interacts with the wave to create the outcome he or she desires. I believe the new leadership paradigm, or maybe the best paradigm in leadership, always has been to be interactive, to factor in those forces and circumstances we can't control, and then to interact with them in such a way that we're still able to profit and grow and take care of our teams. So I'm going to give you 4 ideas, and here's the first one. You've got to begin by thinking better. Actually, I believe you've got to think differently. See, there are 2 questions, and only one of them gets asked in times of change. The first question, probably top of mind for all of you right now in real estate, is what's important now? You know, with all the changes, people want safety and security. Will the showings be technology-based? What limitations will we have? What new opportunities will arise? And that's important to think about. The problem is you, at the same time, have to focus on a second question, and that is, what always matters? See, what always matters isn't going to change. People want to buy a new home. People want to move. People want safety and security, relationships, service, leadership, quality, excellence. These are all primary things that will never change. The only thing that changes is the context and how you apply those principles. When's it going to be back to normal? I don't believe it is. Welcome to the new abnormal. Now, I got to admit, I first heard that used by Mark Cuban. Guy's got a lot more money than I do, but certainly a very, very smart business person. And you know why I agree with him? Once you think you know what normal is, you stop paying attention. Prior to COVID-19, we thought we knew what was normal, and COVID-19 proved it wasn't. Normal is so rapidly changing that you can't settle in and assume you understand what needs to be done and then just go on autopilot. And that's why I think we're better served when we talk to our team to talk about the new abnormal, or to put it a little bit differently, whatever happens is normal. It's abnormal that things change that much, but the reality is you don't want to become complacent and think in terms of the new normal. That means you've got to think deeper. Now, if you were at Leverage, you might have heard me talk about Rodin. This is a Rodin's sculpture, The Thinker. It was originally called The Poet. And I said at Leverage, you know, most people think that Rodin created this sculpture to remind us that thinking is important. Not really. That's so obvious, it wouldn't be much of a motivation for a great artist. To show you what Rodin was really trying to teach us, I want you to assume the position of the thinker. So for just a moment, put both feet flat on the floor. Take your hand, cock your hand at your wrist and put it underneath your chin. Now here's the key. Take your right elbow and put it at the end of your left knee. That's how the thinker is sitting. It's hard, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, it's difficult, and for some of us, it's painful. And that was the message. Rodin was saying what made you a poet was the ability to think harder and longer and deeper than others. What makes you successful in real estate is your willingness to think harder and longer and deeper than your competitors, to think harder and longer about the needs of your prospects and your customers, to think better about how to engage and train and develop the people on your team. Now, I want you to actually experience what this feels like. So wherever you're at right now, put 9 dots on a piece of paper. And this is the great part, because if you were at Leverage, you saw me do this, you saw the answer, and I'm guessing at least half of you can't remember it these 18 months later or so. Because what I'm going to ask you to do is to connect all 9 of those dots using only 4 straight lines. Without lifting your pencil from the paper. Connect all 9 of those dots using only 4 straight lines. And I'll give you about 20 seconds to do that.
I didn't like it the first time I did this.
I know, and you know what, Earl? Through the magic of computer feedback, I can show you what most of the people right now on this call, on this webinar are doing. That's not it. Here's how you do it. You have to literally work outside the box, think outside the box. You have to begin, go outside the boundaries, and you can see you can do it with 4 straight lines. Here's what I find interesting. So many of us have seen the problem, we saw the answer, but we still didn't learn it. Learning is retention. Learning is being able to use what you were exposed to in the past to be more successful in the future. Now, this isn't the end of the exercise. I want you to use those same 9 dots and using only 3 straight lines. Connect all 9 of those dots without lifting your pencil from the paper. Using only 3 straight lines without lifting your pencil from the paper, connect all 9 of those dots. Now, a bunch of you are going, screw it, I didn't get it with 4. How am I going to get it with 3? This is where most people stop thinking. This is where people say, you know what, I don't think you can, it's too hard, let's just move on to something different. You go into Rodin think when you realize you can intersect the top of the first dot, middle of the second, bottom of the third. You can extend the line out into an extended Z and connect all 9 of those dots. But don't stop there. How would you connect all 9 of those dots? Using only 1 straight line without lifting your pencil from the paper. It's actually very easy. You just have to use 1 really big straight line. The next time you have a problem, the next time you're brainstorming, the next time you're trying to make a client happy, I want you to ask, am I thinking harder and deeper than my competitors would? Because you've got to think not only better, but you've got to think differently in terms of not just what always matters, but what matters now in going forward. This is the path to transformation. If in the next 3 months to 3 years you don't meet resistance, you're on the wrong path. Change and transformation require resistance. Just as muscles don't grow without resistance, neither do brains, neither do skill sets. Or as a pastor I heard years ago once said, if you're not getting resistance from the devil, you're probably going the same direction he is. I think too often we think that transformation is easy, and it's not. So the good news is, as you struggle going forward, look at that as proof that you're on the right path. Number 2, you got to discipline yourself. Now let me define discipline for you. Discipline is doing what needs to be done even when you don't feel like it. And that's the test of leadership. Some people know what to do, but they don't have the courage to do it. My brother is a restaurateur. When they went on shelter at home and restaurants closed in Pueblo, Colorado, where his craft brewery is, he had to tell 40 employees, you're all unemployed. When we open again, you'll all have a job here, but in the interim, you're unemployed. And it was painful. These are people that he liked and people on his team that he supported. But he had to be honest. He didn't want to say, well, let's wait a week or 2 and then have them behind the 8 ball in terms of applying for unemployment to get them through that particular setback. Earl, I can tell you and the people on this webinar going forward, there's going to be a lot of stuff we don't want to do. And what separates the men from the boys, the women from the girls, are those people who do it anyhow. That is the key. Great performances are born not out of talent, but out of discipline. I once heard a speech coach say, if you think Zero Mostel always had passion to perform Fiddler on the Roof every night, and that's why he was good, you're wrong. He was great because he had discipline. And when he had a cold or the flu or a fight with his wife, he still went on stage and did what needed to be done to create a great performance. What I want to share with you today when it comes to discipline is how to create for yourself a routine, or for many of you, look at the routine you've got, the routine you developed during this shelter in place, and see if it serves you well. Because if you can discipline yourself, you can define your day. Here are the components. Number one, you need rest. Now, I've been reading this for a while, and this kind of extended time at home has reminded me. The average American, somewhere between 60 and 70% are sleep deprived. You think, well, you know what? That's why they invented caffeine. It'll just keep you going. The problem with being sleep deprived is it affects your thinking. It can impair thinking to the point of being intoxicated, metaphorically. You're obviously not intoxicated, but you're still impaired. And here's the other thing, is if you don't rest, how are you going to stay healthy and keep your energy up? Because if there's anything you need right now, it's health and energy. Number two is rejuvenation. When I get up in the morning, I always do the same things. I come down to my study. I begin with some prayer and meditation. I check my email. I get it out of the way. I know not everyone recommends doing that. And then I work out 6 days a week. And then I eat the same breakfast every morning. And I start my schedule the same every day, because I don't want to develop bad patterns that come back to haunt me post-COVID-19. First thing I do is I say, what are the biggest problems I have today? I had some concrete work done last November. Today I saw there was a crack in the new concrete work. Biggest problem, getting a hold of the guy and getting it fixed. A lot of times leaders attack small problems thinking that that makes them successful, and they leave the big problems burning on the back burner. I like to prioritize, hit your biggest problems first. Then ask yourself, what are your projects? I have done so many projects that evidently in 61 years on this planet, I did not have time to do before. I would say about half of them are work-related, half of them are home-related. But it doesn't matter to me whether it's personal or professional, because the reason you want to give your team projects and the reason you need projects is to create a sense of accomplishment. If you don't feel you're accomplishing, you become lethargic and depressed. Now, I'm not saying use activity to anesthetize the problems that you face. I'm saying use the right project, constructive projects, to read or learn a skill or change a process in your business that you never had time to do before. Relationships. Important time to be doing relationship building. Now, I know there's going to be some people that disagree with me right now, but I did a podcast, a duct tape leadership, and I said right now, in my opinion, this was actually 3 weeks ago, maybe the best marketing is no marketing at all. The best marketing is to be available, to be of service, and to let people know you care about them. Because right now I'm hearing from people I never knew I had a relationship with who seem to think I'm really, really concerned with what they're doing about COVID-19. True relationships are the relationships you should be focusing on building and maintaining. Then number 6, at the end of the day, recreation. So let me tell you my work with large clients, what I'm running into right now. Because there's no beginning and end of the workday, and because email and text and computer makes you available, I find a lot of execs are suffering from decision fatigue. There's no off button. There's no chance to rest or relax. Now, that's not really true. They just don't take the chance or make the time to rest or relax. Please don't let this crisis go by without investing in time you spend with your family. We always have excuses in the past why we don't do it as much. There's no excuse for that now. And then finally, number 7 is repeat the next day. If you define your day through discipline and routine, you'll find yourself being productive, even though there are many things now that you aren't able to do that you once were. One of the things I suggest you do is share PIE. I know it's corny, it's an acronym, but boy, I found these 3 things to be important. Bring yourself and your team back to the larger purpose. What are you about? Not just in terms of making money. Sure, we all want to make money, but why? Get behind the money to the why. And it gets people focused from the tactical, looking down, to the higher purpose, looking up. and share ideas. I've gotten more good ideas in the last 8 weeks than I probably have in the last 8 years, for a simple reason. I have time to look for them, and my friends have time to share their ideas with me. And this has been a wonderful thing that I have used to create value for others, is when I found something that I thought would be relevant to them and their business, I shared that idea with them. And then finally, all people really need sometimes is a little bit of an encouragement, an affirmation that says, you know what, you can do it. You've done it before, and you can do it again. And you can be productive every day and build up others on your team and the ones that you do business with by sharing those 3 things: purpose, ideas, and encouragement. Now, number 3, going to get real practical about business going forward. We've got to redefine value. I can tell you what the customer always wants. I can tell you what the customer is going to want when COVID-19 is over or past, and I can tell you it's the same thing they've always wanted before it began. The difference is how you deliver it. Customers want more success. They want to live better lives, have better businesses, make more money, and be happier. And I use success as the umbrella over all that rather than just a better life. So that means going forward, you've got to focus on the emotion economy. Right now, if you're a restaurateur, not only are you looking at operations to keep people safe, but convincing the people that they really are. I was talking to the head of economic development for the community where my office is located. And I said, you know, a lot of people are worried about carryout. And again, this was a little earlier because they don't know what the people in the kitchens are doing. And he said, you know what? These kitchens look like surgery centers and everyone is so careful and cautious. And I said, then why aren't these restaurants posting videos showing what happens to prepare and box your food and to send it out for delivery? Because it isn't just enough to do it if the customer doesn't feel you've done it. That means you've got to design and deliver for positive emotion, security, safety, health, access to good information, because right now it's high tide for bad information flooding the internet and flooding into our lives. And that means thinking a little bit differently. In the past, we thought about experience. You know, what kind of experience do we create? That's important, but not nearly as important as what the customer or the client or the prospect feels about that experience. And finally, number 4, you got to lead. Now you say, well, Mark, that's obvious. Not really. Some people don't know this, but you cannot manage your way out of a crisis. You lead your way out of a crisis. And I want to tell you right now, it might surprise you what job number 1 of an effective leader is. It's taking care of him or herself. Because if you don't stay healthy and you don't take care of yourself, you cannot take care of your team. In other words, if you sacrifice, don't sacrifice your health and energy. You might have to sacrifice some time or some income or some other resources. But job number 1 is this: the leader must take care of him or herself so they can take care of their team. I have a friend that is a regional guy over, I guess, 6 or 8 Texas Roadhouse restaurants. Most of you on this webinar know about Texas Roadhouse. They are the middle market steakhouse, always year after year, number 1 in their space. And they went to carryout. And so my friend Steve Miller, not to be confused with the Fly Like an Eagle Steve Miller, another Steve Miller, I pinged him by text just to check in. I said, Steve, how are you doing surviving the coronavirus? And he sent me this back. And you'll see that that's a gladiator, and it's a shield, and on it, it has the logo of Texas Roadhouse, and it says, I love my job. Now, read what he wrote. I don't know if he cribbed it from somebody else, but this is Steve in a nutshell. He said, I will never quit. I persevere and thrive on adversity. My team expects me to be physically harder and mentally stronger than my enemies. If knocked down, I will get back up every time. I will draw on every remaining ounce of strength to protect my teammates and to accomplish our mission. I am never out of the fight. You say, well, Mark, isn't this just a lot of macho posturing? No, listen to this. He's got a restaurant in Parker, Colorado, about 8 miles from where I'm standing right now. They have matched sales on delivery and carryout that they used to have on sit-down service. Now, the margins are different. It's less margin when you have carryout, but they've still been able to match sales. And most people would have said that's impossible, can't be done. And yet, Steve is proof that with the right operations and the right attitude, it can be done. there's times you're discouraged. There's times I'm discouraged. I've had to apologize at least once for just being so bleak about the situation that when I felt better later, I said to my friends who I was venting to, you know, I'm sorry because I don't feel that way all the time or even most of the time. It's okay to be honest, but overall attitude is contagious, and mirror neurons in the brain pick up on what the leader does. And even if you're saying the right things and you're doing the right things, your attitude becomes contagious to your team members. So monitor your attitude as much as you monitor your intellectual thought and your behavior. Now, how do you lead out of change? I'm going to give you 4 quick ideas before we open it up to questions. First, everybody's got to walk the talk, but you as a leader have to take the first steps. You have to exemplify. If you don't, no matter how much you cajole or threaten or plead, others won't do what you yourself aren't willing to do. And then you've got to communicate. And this is my pet peeve, because during COVID-19, there's been so much bad advice about communication. I have read CEOs that I basically agree with and respect who have said incorrectly that you've got to over-communicate. When you over-communicate, nobody takes you seriously. When you open your inbox and there's 180 messages and 160 of them are from people that have been spamming you, that becomes an impediment to getting the right message. You've got to communicate better. And I can tell you exactly what communicating better looks like. If you do these 2 things, you will be a better communicator instantly. Number 1, simplify and shorten. Make sure you never waste people's time, because even though they've got more free time than they had, they still don't want to waste it. And the important thing about all communication, especially with your team, is don't end without an ask or a call to action. I had a pastor once, he said, I want to preach in such a way on Sunday that you can remember the one thing I want you to do during the week on Wednesday. And that's how I like to write emails, so that people are crystal clear on why I've approached them, why I've given them information, either to inform them or to ask for help. And you got to be absolutely crystal clear on what you want them to do. You've got to communicate. Then you've got to express concern. Keep your head and heart in the game, because people are afraid. You probably know, as I do, people who have lost loved ones. Maybe you know someone who's been taken by COVID-19. And if we get too wrapped up in the head part, we lose our compassion for people. We've got to be able to express concern. And finally, you've got to be good at explaining the consequences. If you ask somebody to do something and you give them no reason not to do it or no reason to do it, they won't do it. That's human nature. We like to conserve energy. So you've got to be real clear on what you believe the consequences will be for the people doing or not doing the things you're asking them to do. And if you think of those as 4 dials on your leadership dashboard, those 4 things are most important for helping you lead out of this crisis. Max Dupree used to be the CEO of Herman Miller Office Furniture. He said, leaders keep hope alive. And not only do they keep hope alive, but they do it in a practical way. See, there's a sales book, I bet some of you read it, called Hope is Not a Strategy. I disagree. I think hope is a strategy if you define it like I do. Hope is having something new to try and being willing to try it. In other words, you will never be hopeless going forward if you can find something new to try, if you can keep searching for a new idea, a new technique, a new technology, and then you're willing to implement it. You only lose hope when you have nothing to do, or you have something to do, but you're unwilling to do it. Leaders are merchants of hope. They keep hope alive. Now I want to practice what I teach, so I'm going to give to you the 4 calls to action, 4 very simple things before we go to Q&A. To do, number 1, think differently, think better. Think harder. Exert your brain more than you have before. That's what's going to be necessary to thrive in the future. Number 2, discipline yourself. Do what needs to be done. Become the master of discipline. Define your day by using a routine. Number 3, redesign your value proposition around primary emotions that will be so important coming out of this. And finally, number 4, lead. Don't manage, lead. And I'll let you in on a secret, and it should make you happy to know this. You're not going to get it all right, so stop beating up on yourself if you don't. No leader is clairvoyant. No leader gets it all right. The job of a leader is to work harder, to be informed, and make the best decisions that he or she possibly can. And if the decisions you make don't work, you tweak them, you do them differently, you quit doing them, but you make sure that you do something, and it's based on being informed and having the best resources to get that information from. So where does that leave us today? Before I conclude, Verl, we're at about 30 minutes or so. We'll open it up for any Q&A. I'm going to let you moderate since it's hard for me to see the chat boxes. And again, the quality of Q depends, the quality of A depends on the Q. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll do my best to answer them. If I don't know, I'll tell you that I'm clueless.
Okay, so first, wow, and thank you, Mark. There's such a difference between people who pretend to be leaders and those who legitimately are. And you're a great leader, and I appreciate you sharing your insight and the thoughts and the deep thought that you put into this, into the presentation. I have a couple of questions for you as we're waiting for others to use the chat box. So use the chat box, if you will, to just type in your questions. One of the questions I have is you talked about redesigning. You talked about redesigning around emotion. A lot of things we're dealing with. Matter of fact, I was on a call today with a coaching client who was really struggling with going out and showing properties. Although they have clients that want to move forward, they don't want to put the sellers at risk. They don't want to put themselves or their families at risk. And there's a lot of emotion that's going on here. And we can't tell people how they should feel. So how do you help people do that?
Well, let me kind of start at the big end of the funnel. Take your past experience that you try to create for your buyers, but as you get more information and you know the limitations going forward, take that experience and then basically look at every point and ask yourself, what emotion does this support? We had a fellow come in and upgrade our security system today to 5G. And when my wife has an autoimmune suppression, my mother-in-law lives with us, she's 85. And so I was really concerned about bringing anybody into the house, even for a short period of time. And the security central company said, well, let's explain what's going to happen. He'll wear booties, he'll wear gloves. He will have limited contact. He won't shake your hand. He will wipe down every surface that he touches before he leaves. And when he came, the stress was minimized because he did exactly those things. See, I think one of the ways you create security is through education. And again, it's better to show than to simply tell. Showing's always better than just telling. Show and tell tells better. I think in terms of how people feel, I think the connective bridge between how people feel, whether or not you agree with them, is I understand why you might feel that way. Let me explain what I feel and what caused me to feel that way. In other words, you acknowledge, because if you're married or you're dating, you know, you don't want to deny somebody's feelings, even if you don't agree that they're appropriate, unless you want to no longer be married or dating. So what you need to do is you need to acknowledge that emotion. Or I just read this recently and I loved this, and I don't know who to attribute this construct to, but you say to yourself, you don't say it out loud, you ask yourself, what would the world have to look like to that person for them to feel that way? Interesting. I know it sounds simple, but try it. Even if somebody just, take someone who's got a different political point of view or who has a different lifestyle, and then ask yourself, and it creates empathy. It doesn't mean you'll change the way you feel, but it creates a form of empathy that lets you connect to their emotion. And then you can speak to those things that have created that negative emotion and talk about what you can do, what your team can do to create a positive emotion. I've had this conversation with my son, Jackson, also known as Jack Wavy. He's a rapper, and he's starting out in real estate. Verl knows this, and Verl's been a great friend and resource to help point him in the right direction. But I said to him, I said, Jack, you're at a perfect time. You're starting out. You've got no habits. You've got no behaviors that you're going to go, oh man, I've done this for so many years. I don't know how I'm going to quit doing it. Well, it's all new to you. And so you're going to get to be an innovator. And this is something I've been telling all my clients. Your greatest opportunity in real estate going forward is to address the pain points. Always address the pain points. That's where the opportunities live to create value. Just making people happy isn't enough. If you can make them happier than they were before they met you, that's what gives you the ultimate advantage.
That's so true. A lot of questions, and that's a great answer. So how do you recommend someone who's having a hard time engaging their team to keep them motivated when they're all sequestered at home, they're having a hard time. I thought your list of the things to do was really good, starting with, creating a routine and going through that list that you started with. But is there anything particular that you would recommend for a team leader that's having a hard time getting them off the sofa?
Well, first of all, here's what I'd suggest you do with your team as a whole, and that is once a week record a very brief video, maybe a minute to 2 minutes. Everybody goes, oh, that's not long. Trust me. I have a friend, very well-known friend, who does a minute with, let's call him Matthew, a minute with Matthew, and I've timed him, he always goes 2 to 4 minutes. So it's not a minute with Matthew. It's more like 4 minutes with Matthew. But record a quick video and keep track of the messaging. Maybe one message is to encourage. Maybe one message is to talk about the bigger purpose. Maybe one message is to share an idea. But keep it very brief. Film it from your Android or from your iPhone. Send it out every Monday morning. That you can do for the whole group. Then I would, either via email or a phone call or Zoom or whatever medium you choose, go through that list and ask them every week, what are your 2 or 3 biggest problems? What are your 2 or 3 biggest projects? And coach them around framing up the to-do, not the how to do it, but the what I need to do. Because you can then bring that sense of accomplishment to them. So that's why we feel disengaged. I've always said people would rather be overworked than underworked. If you've ever worked at a job where you didn't have enough to do, that'll kill you. That'll kill you, crush your soul. Now, you don't want to be overworked either. I'm not a masochist. But when people don't have specific actions to take, if they don't have that coaching about what they need to do to solve problems and make things happen, they'll become lethargic. So that's what I would recommend in terms of trying to increase the engagement of your team.
I like that. And think about you specifically talk about new projects that people needed to feel accomplished, that they were doing something that was making a difference. And I think that's where disengagement comes, is when they don't feel like whatever they're doing matters.
Well, engagement isn't to, when you think about it, engagement isn't to a person. And, I'm not talking about marriage. Engagement is to an activity. When you say somebody's engaged at work, that doesn't mean that they're sitting at their desk, teary-eyed about what a wonderful boss they have. It means they're engaged at doing something that is worthwhile and meaningful and gives them a sense of accomplishment. So that's what engagement is. We tend to think that, engaged at work is how people feel about their jobs. Now, the good news is when people are engaged, they feel a whole lot better about their jobs. But it's not about getting them engaged to, I just want them to like me and love me. No, that'll happen if you're a good leader. Get them engaged in a productive, meaningful, worthwhile task.
So Jose said that a lot of people are talking about the same points and we love the concepts, but what can we do that's remarkably different that we could implement that not everybody else in real estate is doing for their clients? What's something that we can do that'll help us lead, that'll stand out as being, everyone's making how you doing COVID-19 follow-up calls. What can we do that's different?
Well, I always say when it comes to creating value, there's the high road and the low road. The high road usually takes a lot of time and money. The low road are simple, thoughtful things that really make a difference to the client. Give you an example. I've got one of my investment firms, like most investment firms, it's not been a banner, first quarter. One of the things they did is they sent me and all of their clients a free membership to masterclass.com. I don't know if you know masterclass.com, but basically they've gone to the world's leading experts in everything from music to culinary arts to performance to athletics, and they have them teach these little mini courses. And it normally, I think, is $190 a year, but I'm sure that this money manager got a discount. And I just remember thinking, you know what? They're not just trying to convince me, they're doing their damnedest to make sure that, they make money for me. But that was thoughtful. And every time I log on to Masterclass, I think of Ibex. I think of these guys. That's such a great example. Dairy Queen. And this was, again, a while back when people were first starting to stay at home with their kids. My kids are grown now, so I didn't have that challenge. They sent out a printable coloring book, and then it had their products and their characters and such. But I thought, little thing, didn't take much money, didn't take much time, but it proved we're not just trying to sell you something, we're trying to make your life a little bit better. The higher road, I think that if I were you, I would really start mastering virtual technology. I'm a neophyte. I know 5 times more now than I did 2 months ago, but I still have about 500 times more to learn. I have a friend that works for a startup here in Denver called Pineapple Labs. And if you look at them, they basically have a technology that increases pixelization so that any photos you take of a home, and some of you might have heard of Pineapple Labs. I believe Keller Williams is already using them. It creates the kind of lighting as if you were there. In other words, you don't lose the translation from real time to the screen. That's just an example. But I think if you can find ways, I think, for instance, if you're not using a drone right now, and probably many of you are because you guys are in the top few percent of realtors, but if you're not using a drone right now, you're missing an opportunity. So look at the little thoughtful things as well as the differentiators that may cost money, but more often than not, they'll cost time. Technology has come down so much in the last 10 or 15 years that it's about choosing the right or best technology and then mastering it, and that's what gives you the competitive advantage.
I couldn't agree more with that. Being a master of all virtual services will set you apart from the agents who pretend that they are versus who really become a master of those services. This is from Samuel and Mark. Coincidentally, this is what you and I were talking about before we started the webinar. He says that, I'm in the human capital business where I make my money when people get together. And in the absence of people getting together, do you have, like with seminars and conferences, do you have a couple of ideas that you would recommend for creating continuous income when those events aren't happening?
Well, I'm not tearing up, excuse me. I'm a professional speaker. My primary income is getting up in front of a large audience. And so I'm unemployed for the foreseeable future. I don't know if there will ever be as many large events, not because of fear factor, but because I think we're finding out some of the things that we took for granted really weren't necessarily needing to be done. So the pat answer, and I apologize if it seems a little pat, but always go back to what is your core offering, your core talent, your core service. And for me, it's expertise in leadership and service strategy. I've written 8 or 9 books, and I've got a lot of it digitized in my bank vault of expertise. My favorite way to present it is in front of an audience where I can goof around and have a great deal of fun and meet people and shake hands and make new friends. But you know what? Life is what it is. I always say, if you fight the battle of the inevitable, you're a fool. If it's inevitable, you say, I got to look for an alternative. So you take your core and then you look for the context you can reapply it, whether it's technology, whether it's smaller groups. I still think that, for instance, let me give you, I have a friend that is the president of a university. If you're the president of a university and you happen to be on this call by mistake, you're probably wetting your pants right now, because these kids like mine, my senior, he didn't seem too put off by doing his final semester online. And what that means is that other than the social, the going out with your buddies and having a beer on Friday night and dating the sorority girl that you met in class, there's a whole lot of education that doesn't need to be done in real time. So the question then becomes, do you just go all virtual and say, well, you know what, we're going to shutter the buildings that have been named after our wonderful alumni and put it online? Probably not, because almost always the world is and not either or. So if you're taking notes, the world is almost always and not either or. Rarely is it one or the other, usually it's both. But how about this? Let's say you've got a university and you've got, let's just make up a number, 1,000 alumni in 50 cities. My guess is you better start staffing for an individual city coordinator. We would call him a salesperson, perhaps, in real estate or in my business. But what that person's job is to provide the connectivity by getting 5 or 10 people, whatever the legal limit is, together for real events. Maybe it's an outside speaker. Maybe it's another alumni. But in other words, you just create a smaller connection point rather than requiring somebody from those 50 cities to fly to where the university is. So as we start, and these are things we probably wouldn't have thought of, but we have to now. And unless you're just ready to retire and say, you know what, I'm out of here. Luckily, I got enough money left that, I don't have to do anything. This is what we got to think about. This actually I find fascinating, because I believe this. So help me, Burl, this is not happy talk. I hate happy talk. I hate people that just, I don't know if it's going to be all right, but I do believe we're going to have a resurgence of innovation and entrepreneurialism that we've never seen before, because it's almost always born out of crisis and tragedy and setback. Where there's pain, smart people figure out how to address it.
I love that you said that earlier. You know, find the pain. Where are people's problems and come up with solutions? Let's solve problems, and that's how we innovate and grow and stay. So we're making money and being profitable. That comes as a result of solving problems. Love that. Maybe one last question, then we'll let you wrap this up. I appreciate all your energy and the questions. Chris Fidelibus from Honolulu says, you know, what do I do if my emails are well defined, which you talked about, but nobody actually reads the emails to the end? They're short points and their numbers. How do I keep people focused and engaged in my communication?
Well, I'll give you an idea or two. The first is nothing more than a trick and will only work once or twice. And that is, at the end of this email, I'm going to give you a code you're going to need to fill in the blank. Access, get this service, fill out this form. And again, because, isn't it interesting, Chris? I love what you're saying is in that human nature, if it's 30 lines long, you read 10. If it's 10 lines long, you read 3. If it's 3 lines, I mean, what I've always tried to do is, you know, in a website, you talk about below the fold, that's whatever doesn't become visible after the page loads. I try to do the same thing with emails. Now, I know there's a lot of browser diversity, but try to load your email so that the whole message, the key message, gets in what opens instantly and they don't have to scroll to get the rest of it. So the first is a trick. The second is just kind of an architectural design.
Great ideas. And subject lines matter. I've learned that having the right subject line absolutely matters in whether or not they even open it versus read it. So Mark, you had just a...
Thank you all, by the way. I hope that you're all doing well despite the challenges. And I want you to look at this guy's picture. His name was Jean-Dominique Bauby. Jean-Dominique Bauby was the editor of the French fashion magazine Elle. He was at the top of his game. He was at the top of the world. He lived in France, went to the best parties, ate the best food, knew the supermodels, the famous people. And he was a single father of 3. He was divorced. And one night while he was driving his kids to an athletic event, and that was December 8th, 1995, his vision started to constrict. He started to see a narrowing of his vision, and he quickly pulled the car over to the side of the road and lost consciousness. When he awoke some 2 or 3 weeks later, he was at Berck-sur-Mer, which was a hospital in France, where he was told that he was the victim of a massive stroke and now suffered from a very rare condition called locked-in syndrome. Locked-in syndrome is when a totally functioning brain is trapped inside a totally immobilized body. Now, there's a range of how immobilized a body could be. His was the most severe. The only ability he had was to open and close his left eye. His right eye wouldn't close. Therefore, it didn't irrigate. They had to sew it shut. There's a movie made about his life. If you saw the movie, a very poignant scene where the surgeon is sewing his eye shut so that it doesn't become septic. And Jean-Dominique Bauby, fully functioning brain, being fed by a tube intravenously, totally paralyzed, wrote a book about his experiences. He lost 1/3 of his body weight, that is him in the hospital, and the book was called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. Now the question becomes, how did he write this book? He was totally paralyzed. We already know the answer. He wrote the book by blinking his left eye. An assistant took the letters of the alphabet in frequency of usage. E, S, A, R, first, foremost, frequently used letters in French. 1 blink, got an E. 2 blinks, got an S. The average word took 2 minutes to blink out. He did over 200,000 blinks over the course of 10 months to write a book about what it was like to be fully alive inside a totally paralyzed body. I read the book when it first came out, and it made such an impact on me. I hadn't reread it until COVID-19. I even went back and rewatched the movie. And here's what he said. He talked about the fact that when he was fully able, he'd eaten at some of the best restaurants in the world and never thought twice about the food. He said now he had time to go back and remember the recipes and the chefs and the food and to savor, to re-enjoy the meal. He said he couldn't embrace a loved one or his children, but he remembered what that embrace felt like, and he replayed it vividly in his mind. He said he used to always want to direct movies. He didn't have time, so he became a movie producer. He wrote scripts and he set up scenes, and he even went back and changed dialogue and scenes of other movies that other people had made because he thought it would make them better. Talks a little bit about his faith. He talks a little bit about his family, his philosophy, his failings. But the reason that I bring this up today, and I'm going to paraphrase, I encourage you to read the book. It's a short book. To me, he basically said this. He said, I would never wish for anyone the tragedy that's befallen me. And I can't say that I'm in any way happy that I'm facing it, but I am. He said, my message is, as long as you are conscious, you have everything you need for a rich, meaningful life. If you have the gift of consciousness, despite your limitations, you have the ability to live a rich, rewarding, and meaningful life. I can't think of a more vivid lesson from somebody who experienced far greater tragedy than I hope any of us ever experience. And I think that's the message going forward. As long as we're conscious, as long as we can think up new things to try, and we are able-bodied as he was not, and we're able to try them, we'll have everything we need to thrive in the days and weeks and months and years ahead. I wish you all Godspeed. God bless.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you so much for your wisdom. Everybody take a screenshot of this screen right here, marksanborn.com. Let's follow him on social media. If you want to know more about his leadership products or programs, he didn't talk about any of those things, but they're phenomenal. Check in and download what he has to offer. Great presentation. A lot of love coming from the chat group, Mark. Thanks for sharing with us today. I wish you and your family the very best. Stay safe and stay positive and keep doing what you're doing out there because you're making a difference.
You as well.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much, everybody. What a wonderful presentation. Greetings from Kampala, Uganda. God bless.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.